Hi, I'm Marty Gold, and I'm here with a commentary on the 2023 Manitoba provincial election. In my most recent column for winnipegtribune.ca, I posed the question of whether the working class voters had turned against unions. And in the course of that piece, I wrote something that got a little bit of attention, a little bit of commentary as I circulated it online, where I noted that the distrust of unions has grown among voters because of the ardent partisan political activity of their leadership, which has grown to a point there's a certain malaise whenever the phrase union endorsed comes up. People hear that, oh, the union's endorsing this or that or some party or something. It's like, yeah, of course they are. And I pose the question, do you hear a lot of sympathy for teachers' unions among the working class? You're just as likely to hear dissent for the dismal results they're producing inside classrooms and the 2 months off every summer that working stiffs can only dream of. And so I was drawn into some conversations about schools, teaching, the whole school system. And lo and behold, the conversation pivoted around to childcare, daycare, which is to say you've got kids that outside of those formal curriculum hours need to be supervised. And increasingly over the decades, parents have relied on the state to come up with solutions. And the most recent solution propagated by governments has been so-called $10 a day daycare, which earlier in the campaign, Wab Kinew promised to expand to weekends and all sorts of other concepts that are just really not costed out properly and counterproductive. But that's for another day. The subject of childcare comes up for parents, comes up for grandparents, because you watch when young couples have their, especially their first kid, and it's like, how do we find a space? And how do we get into a space? And there's no spaces. A CBC story taking a look at this conundrum. With school about to start, parents in Winnipeg scramble to find childcare as demand spikes. The Huron Childcare on McPhillips, for instance, has about 200 people on a wait list for 15 licensed spaces available in the school-age program. Meanwhile, over in the south end of the city, in the Pembina Trails School Division, they've changed their class times in some of the schools. In 12 schools, class time is starting at 9:20 a.m. and ending at 5 minutes to 4. The rest of the schools start at 8:25 and end at 3. Now, I set aside that to me, these hours certainly seem shorter than any school day I ever endured back in my day. And the story noting there's been a surge in demand since the $10 a day child care was introduced in April. And I will get back to that. Now, province of Manitoba, meaning the Conservative government, planning to introduce 23,000 new child care spaces by 2026, but those are specifically for kids under 7. So the problem, the squeeze, one part of the squeeze is kids under the age of 7, infants, toddlers, etc., kindergarten age kids, and then the kids over the age of 7. There are 14,000 licensed spaces for kids between 7 and 12, but the Child Care Association says that that's not nearly enough. Now, one mother in the CBC story made a comment that got a lot of reaction from people as they looked at the article, where this mom said, she considered reducing her hours at work because her kid was going into grade 1 a few years ago. She ended up finding a spot, and she said, ideally, schools would have in-house daycares that would have enough spots for every child in their school. And there's a train of thought out there that goes, this is manifestly unhealthy, because it completely takes away the incentive for families to come up with their own arrangements and keep children close to their parents, grandparents, uncles and aunties, family, friends, neighbors, etc. Gimme, gimme, gimme. And anybody who says, well, what if one parent stays home? Works till, say, 2:30, and then they're home for when the kid comes home when they get out at 3, in this case in Pembina Trails. Well, how many times do you hear now, you're crazy, you're not going to work full time, you're crazy. You just find a daycare spot, or the government should provide you with daycare. But let's look at how different things are for kids now. And I acknowledge that there's challenges that come up in the raising of kids and kids navigating the online world and other such things. But basically, families used to raise kids. There are no daycares. There were maybe people who took in 2 or 3 or 4 kids in their homes, right? But by and large, after school, you'd go to your Baba and Zeta's house, or you go to the neighbor's house, or a bunch of kids would go to somebody's house. And so these things were handled within the community to make sure children were supervised. Another thing is kids were given responsibilities at a young age. Now kids are coddled. Kids would start finding productive work at the age of 10, 11, 12, 13 for the summertime. Kids would work at the age of 14. And this would be on whether it's family-related projects, construction projects, things around their neighborhoods. You don't see kids rushing off very often to get involved in work settings, which teaches them leadership, teaches them teamwork. What do they learn when they're in childcare as opposed to the care of their families? Well, they're learning other things. But the old system prepared kids to become adults quicker so that at the ages of 20 or 25, they were qualified to take responsibility in managing projects, right? To lead crews. Now, let's go back to this $10 a day daycare plan. The example that was cited to me would be of a single mother with 3 kids. That's $30 a day, $150 a week. So it's usually about $25 a day for daycare. So it's saving the mother about $45 a day with 3 kids. 3 kids need childcare. Costs her $30, she's saving $45. That's $225 a week, 5 days a week. That's about $1,000 a month. The question's raised, why instead of giving it to the daycares, which hire, in many cases, unionized staff, why don't we just give that money to the mom and let her decide if that extra $1,000 per month is enough so that she doesn't need to go to work? Now, I don't know that any political party is going to start addressing this idea about encouraging or facilitating stay-at-home parenting, more stay-at-home parenting, because the governments over successive generations, combination of the rise of the rise in 2-income families, was in part born of changing social standards, changing social mores, the rise of feminism, etc. But now it's like a necessity, where a second parent works. Half their money goes to the government, and the other half goes to make sure they have a second car that they can use to pick up the kids, and maybe to top up the groceries. I heard that there are families with like 3 kids, and they're spending $2,200 a month on groceries. So families clearly need more money. They need to have more help in raising their children. There aren't enough childcare spaces. Can you pick up the suggestion here that maybe governments, and by the way, one other thing that I haven't heard come up in this campaign, homeschooling. Homeschooling will again increase the number of kids that are out of the system and that are at home in hours where otherwise they require government-funded, government-subsidized childcare. Now, I don't think this is particularly up Wab Kinu's alley to start promoting families taking care of their own kids and communities doing the same, families, extended families, and extended communities. I don't see that's up Wab's alley. I don't know what Dougald Lamont would say, but I have to say I would be interested. But keep in mind that what he has to say is kind of limited. It's not going to swing an election anywhere close to putting him in a position of power. The Conservative Party has already spoken about the concept of parental rights. Now, what about the parental right to take care of their own kids, and instead of going through this rigmarole of paying $10 to save $45 to let somebody else raise their kid, what about some system that encourages families to be able to be available, have a parent or whoever available for kids in those after hours? Because there's no way, the demand is ridiculous. There's no way government alone is going to solve it, because it's just going to end up being tax dollars. What happens if for lesser tax dollars, other kinds of considerations, parents and families can start to provide the solutions. And also, we know when kids are with their families, they aren't being indoctrinated by teachers. They aren't being indoctrinated by childcare workers. And by no means am I saying all of them do, but you can't avoid the fact that all over this country and all over this continent, there's increasing concerns about the influence of the politics of teachers, which often is a reflection of the politics of their unions and union leaders. There's a lot of concern about that now, and the access that they have to kids and to forming those young minds with regards to political considerations. Of course, the unions would, scream bloody murder about this, but maybe for a change, they can come on board with this, with an idea like this, try to find ways for parents to be able to take care of their kids before and after school care, etc. Maybe the childcare unions and the teachers unions can start actually thinking about the children. We'll see if any of the political parties pick up on this as the campaign moves towards the official kickoff. I'll be back with more news, analysis, opinion, insight, and I hope a few laughs along the way. Here as I continue to cover the 2023 Manitoba provincial election for winnipegtribune.ca.